Sherry, if you'll unmute yourself and then stay present.
Yes,
Thank you.
present. I can't hear though.
Mr. Bryant? Dr. Kraft?
Yes,
Ms. McKeever? Yes. Ms. Torres? Yes. Ms. Puryear? Yes. And Mr. Wade? Dr. Kraft?
I cannot hear anything, so I don't know what I'm saying yes to.
This is for the approval of our proposed agenda.
Sherry, it's for the approval of the proposed agenda.
Okay, yeah, yes.
Are there any participants in the Zoom meeting that would like to provide public comment? If you would, then please raise your hand, or I'll open the chat and just put a note in the chat. Okay, no hands raised.
So we'll wait just a couple of seconds, and then please keep in mind that there's another opportunity towards the end of the comprehensively on our webpage, and part of this was that we allow
And Dr. Kraft, for the consent agenda?
Yes,
Okay, we're working on the volume, okay?
sure. Thanks.
Dr. Baptist, they're ready for your presentation or your comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Henderson. At the meeting last week, I shared with you the recommendations for policy revisions and for policies that just needed to be reviewed for a 5-year cycle. I was asked to make revisions to a couple of policies. One was EFB. I had Ms. Powell and Mr. Jones to also work on this. So there have been some revisions made in that policy that I bring back tonight. Also, Ms. McKeever and Ms. Bryson Morseberger had shared with me some language that had been previously suggested for policy KNAJ. I have added those changes in, and those are really the only 2 policies that I've made any changes in since we met last time. I did include in the package for this week the wellness policy one more time because there had been conversation about adding the word goal of 200 minutes. And so I wanted to make sure that the community saw that that was still in there and nothing about that has been changed. So I would welcome any questions that anyone may have about these 3 policies or any of the other policies that I presented last week. I would ask too that the board approve these policies. Mr. Henderson and I have discussed the policies and the recommendations that come before you tonight to go ahead and if it's your pleasure to approve these policies, and then I will get all of them set with the correct formatting so that we will have them in place hopefully by July 1.
Thank you, Dr. Baptist. I was, go ahead. I appreciate the change to KNAF. Just to clarify, was that we went to our attorney to ensure that that was relevant and was that okay with our attorney?
I have not taken that to the attorney. I can certainly do that with what you had and looking at the change in program that we have. It seems definitely appropriate, and I've had no problem with the language that was in there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
More than comfortable with that language. I just wanted to make sure it was.
It made perfect sense to me, Ms. McKeever.
Okay. So I would like to move that we approve the policies as written by, as amended by Dr. Baptist, except for the wellness policy at this time. And that we return to, well, I can talk about the wellness policy after.
Is there a second?
So I was thinking that the wellness policy, we can go back, it can be returned to the SHAB for further procedural input, and then return to the school board as soon as possible thereafter for review and approval.
Any further discussions, questions, board members? Ms. Priya?
Is there any implication for deferring? I understand why you want to defer, but Dr. Baptist just said something about July 1 by deferring. We will not be taking action on it until after the 1st. What implications does that have for the division?
My understanding is that the legal requirements for the wellness policy have not changed, and July 1 is not, there's no new law that needs to be incorporated into the policy. It's just a change on the administrative level. So the wellness policy in the past has been approved outside of the normal policy process. So I believe that this is appropriate that we can defer it just for a little while to make sure that it is what the community and advisory board suggests.
Mr.
So
Bryant?
will we be approving this policy at our September's meeting?
I think their first meeting is probably the first Monday or Tuesday of September, so it might not be until later September or early October.
Okay.
Any other questions, concerns?
Dr. Baptist, am I right about all of that? I don't mean to interject when you are clearly expert on all of that.
You're correct. The policy that is in place is within the last 5 years. So it does not have to be reviewed. My thought on it, though, is the proposed policy has much more comprehensive language in it than what is currently there. So the longer we wait to pass the policy, the less comprehensive policy we have in that area. It's my understanding that the real concern with SHAB and especially Ms. Bennett is not necessarily the language in the policy, but the ability of SHAB to be the group who has approval process or veto process on any change in regulations. So it's more the regulation that has been the concern than the actual policy. And it would be still up to the board to consider whether the change in how regulations are presented would occur or not. I did share a policy with a board member this afternoon that indicates the school board policy on how regulations and policies are passed. But I haven't gotten a concern that the actual wellness policy was the issue, but how regulations could be changed, whether it was the responsibility of the superintendent, which is the current policy that we have, and the way that all of our other policies are done in regulations, or if SHAB would have approval or veto power of changing anything. Again, Mr. Henderson and I have talked about the policy, and it's his recommendation, as is mine, that the policy be passed so we can have the policy in place for the school board. We can wait and change regulations if necessary. I am not hearing anything, so I don't know whether anybody in the board is speaking and the other folks on Zoom also are not hearing anything. So if there are any questions or other comments, we're not hearing them.
Thank you, Beth.
All right, I do want to just extend my gratitude to all advisory committees and the work that you do. I want to always express
Mr. Jura has muted, so we're not hearing it again.
Now
So-
we've kind of done it. And
So
Now
my-
we can hear.
Okay, basically, Dr. Baptist, I just was expressing my gratitude to all advisory committees and any and all parents who have provided feedback and communicated to us what their wishes are right now, especially seeing as school is out. And so we do appreciate that you were, sharing with us what you would like. I think Ms. McKeever has made a motion. There was a second to it. Mr. Henderson did make comment to the fact that we're okay with pulling the wellness policy and allowing SHAB to have the opportunity to meet again in September and review and discuss this together face to face. So if there's no further discussion, from board members? Then Madam Clerk, will you please take a vote on this?
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Bryant. Ms. Bryson Morseberger.
Yes.
Dr. Kraft.
Yes,
Ms. McKeever.
Yes.
Ms. Torres.
Yes.
Ms. Poirier.
Yes.
And Mr. Wade.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Baptist.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the approval of our return to learn virtual options for the 2021-2022 school year as presented last week by Dr. Odie.
Good evening, Madam Chair, school board members, Mr. Henderson. Last week, again, staff did present the fall 2021 reopening plan to include the 5 days in person instruction that school divisions are required to offer to all students by law, as cited in Senate Bill 1303. Staff also presented a limited CCS virtual plan, grades 3 through 8, and virtual options for grades 1 through 12. Tonight, the superintendent recommends that the board take action. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Dr. Odie. Are there any questions, board members, of the proposed plan?
Yeah, I just, Deshaun, the student rep, he really felt strongly about more virtual options and I just want to know, were we able to address part of his or any of his concerns? I know that we have, CCS virtual and Virginia virtual. And if that is sufficient as to address students like his concerns.
Specifically the pre-K two that is in person only.
We do have virtual options in the high school. Of course, Dr. Irizarry shared what his plan was. We do have virtual Virginia as an option for courses that students would like to take. We did hear Jasan's concerns and desire. And so that's why we do have that as an option in the event that students such as Jasan are interested in moving in that route.
Still has some
I think-
concerns involved.
Yeah, I think Dr. Odie, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think his concerns were if he had a younger, or if someone has a younger sibling in the home and say an older student, say at the high school level, had that option to attend virtually, and they were responsible for caring for a younger sibling who might also want that option to attend virtually, but we aren't offering that. So I think that was.
Right, I'm so sorry. It is, of course, our goal to bring all of our students back in person, face to face. So we did not offer a K-2 option at this point because, as I shared last week, we realized that our youngest students learn best in person. We do realize that there are students as low as kindergarten and first grade who were successful virtual learners. We do acknowledge that. But we have to also acknowledge that we realize that students that are learning their foundational skills, reading and writing, holding a pencil, having the teacher be able to see their mouth and them be able to see the teacher's mouth is so important for our foundational learners. So we did not offer a K-2 option at this time.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's not necessarily in debate, but I think there may be situations where, a family or 2 or 3 or 4, for whatever reason, are not comfortable, having their young child, especially if we're, looking at the possibility of those youngest learners not having protection from vaccinations if they choose to have that, or even if vaccines are available, maybe there is that hesitancy for them to not take the vaccine. So, we still want to be able to address the educational needs of students that might fall into that. And I don't know how many there may be, but it sounds like from Mr. Johnson that he had a strong sense that there may be students who need that option. And so I guess we were hoping that we might have, you know, the opportunity for staff to look at whether or not we can meet those needs.
One thing we do have to remember is that because we are legally required to bring students back in 5 days a week, we anticipate that we're going to have a large number of our students that are returning to in-person learning. And so staffing is an issue there. And so if we do have 2 or 3 primary grade students who are interested in virtual learning, then we'd have to think about what staffing would look like for that when we have to have teachers in the building to teach those students that are in person. So we would not pull a teacher to teach 2 or 3 students that are virtual.
I think we all understand that, but I guess the fact that we're not even opening it up to that age group is concerning to me. I mean, we don't know how many, if we're not allowing families with students at those ages to at least say, hey, I'm one of those families who has a young child. So if we don't know, or if we don't offer it, anyway, that's my opinion.
I'm not saying that there has to be an answer to it, because I certainly understand the critical need of the, young children have to be, for those fundamental learning, that they have to be on site. It sounds like we just may have to see if there's a lot of students like that. We may have to come up with a solution there, but I think now we may be able to address that specific concern.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Our responsibility as a school division is to serve our families. That's our utmost responsibility. The plan we put in front of you is some guidelines to give you where we need to move forward with. We know that we've been doing the grades 3 through 8 relatively well, and we know those students, some of them have a good opportunity and do well in a virtual setting. Grades 9 through 12, we have many of our high school kids have been doing virtual Virginia, and some of them have selected our CCS model that we've been using at CHS for a while. I think we would take every applicant a case-by-case situation. If there were some young learners, grades K through 12, that they, because of the situation that they're in or because of concerns, then we will definitely address that and try to serve them. So for us we have a plan. We're moving forward with, this is guidelines. Folks, this is the first we've done this. It's going to be, we're not out of bringing everything back to normalcy. So we're trying to move forward in that direction. But we know that we'll have some students, grades through 2nd, that parents feel that they need to keep their child at home. We will meet their needs and we'll figure it out. And if it becomes an issue with staffing, we'll come back and look at, come to you for additional funding. So here, what we gave you is a framework of moving forward. We have an application that any parent can complete, and we'll review the success of their students and listen to their needs. As I said, our goal is we serve our community, and we'll do what we can to do that.
Ms. Puryear.
Madam Chair, I too was concerned about Mr. Wade's issue, but having been involved with this division long before being on the school board, I think that if we have particular concerns, if families have particular concerns, they have always been addressed, and to the best of the division's ability, accommodations have been made. And so if those issues present themselves in the fall, I feel comfortable that Dr. Odie and her team, in conjunction with Mr. Henderson, will make the necessary accommodations for any families that may fall into that category.
May I just
Yeah.
jump in quickly back here, because I don't know how to signal anybody. But I think with Mr. Henderson's clarification and knowing that we will make efforts to adapt and adjust if there are needs that arise, then that, to me, that would be enough for me to support the plan as presented.
Lashandra?
I was just going to ask, just to say, I appreciate the flexibility because that is an ongoing concern for some families in the community still with younger children. I was just wondering if we can add it somewhere in that application process. It just says that if your learner is, K through 2 and you need, you're interested in this or you need an accommodation due to COVID, just so that it's out there so that they can know to email and to ask, because if you're not watching this meeting, you might not know that it's an option to ask about it.
I can appreciate
Is
that.
that so? I move that we adopt the proposed return to learn recommendation from staff.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I hope that I think you all have heard that. I think Ms. Bryson Morseberger's comment is well taken, and yeah, so I assume we will see that in places like, let us know if you need additional virtual support.
Thank you. All right, Madam Clerk, if you'll take the vote on that, please.
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Bryant,
Yes.
Ms. Bryson Morseberger,
Yes.
Dr. Crab,
Yes.
Ms. McKeever,
Yes.
Ms. Torres,
Yes.
Ms. Poirier,
Yes.
and Mr. Wade.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Odie. All right, we are moving on now to our leadership profile presentation from Hazard, Young, and Atia and Associates regarding our superintendent search. So if everybody will please welcome Brad and Ann, who have been diligently working this from the get-go, but especially this last week on opportunities and forums and community outreach. So thank you both for being here with us tonight.
You, and we're glad to be back. We had a great week here, engaged, and Ann did it virtually, and I did some of the days live, but we had a very, very busy week and met a lot of different people in Charlottesville City and school system. So we were very, very pleased to present the report tonight. We have given you a 34-page single-spaced report. We're not going to go our way through that. Instead, we took the highlights of that in the online survey and turned it into 13 PowerPoint slides, and one of them is a title page, so we really have 12 slides to talk about. But I want to first thank, and we'll thank her again at the end, Leslie Thacker did a great job setting this all up for us, managing on the flow and fitting people in when we need to fit in, and we're very, very pleased, and we think it went very well. This is an important part of the process because it's when we engage with your community to find out what we need to know, but also probably it's a good mirror and lens for you as board members and as our community to look at what people are saying, because it's a nice thing to get almost a survey of where your community is. And so, Ms. Thacker, if you could go to the second slide that talks about engagement with stakeholders. This is our participatory delineation of who participated. Board of Education members got 7 individual interviews. And then we saw 65 administrators, either in group settings or individually, and that's a very large proportion for individually. So we thought that was a very good representation. Teachers were small, but if you go to the next column, over 25% of your teachers responded to the online survey. So we find that as a very high response rate. We normally don't see that high response rate on the online survey from teachers. So that I think very good. And by the way, in those 9 teachers, some of them are representing larger groups. For instance, I met with a rep at the high school who had brought the entire high school faculty's concerns and comments to the meeting with me. Support staff, 15 in person. Students, it was the last day of school. We had some juxtaposition there. So we sat patiently waiting for that first student to zoom in, and we just, like the Maytag repairman, it never happened, but you have to be very old to understand that joke. I'm sorry. And then 16 parents, but 88 did respond online, and 67 students responded online, which is a very good response again. So we feel, and we've gone through their responses, and I think you as board members can see that too. Community members 22 and 27 respectively. Grand total of in-person 134. That number is actually much higher. Ann Monday is the cleanup person here, and she has been engaging throughout the last couple of days with people who didn't get a chance to meet us in person. We're on Zoom those last days. So Ms. Thacker and Ms. Monday have been working together. And I think we're winnowing that down, but I know that number is much higher, but we'll leave it at 134. And we can know that it's probably more like 140, 150 or something like that. 347 on your online response. We had the principals push out a message and we got a good response after that. And again, I'm very pleased with the teachers, 481 responses altogether. So in this 34-page report, you'll see responses by teachers, by administrators, by board members, and it's along those same three questions of what are the overall strengths, what are the overall concerns, and what are the characteristics needed in the new superintendent. But I'm going to let Ann now take you through Ann and Brad's interpretation of everything we heard in repeated fashions. In other words, when we would meet with certain different groups, these themes kept coming through and keep coming through. So in this PowerPoint slide presentation tonight, we're going to see the themes that overarch across all the stakeholders that we talked to. So Ann, take it from there.
Let me speak very briefly about methodology. As you can see, we would tell groups and individuals that we're taking literal notes, and we provided you with those literal notes. You can see them as part of the report. So we culled through those notes and looked for repeated themes, and that gave us what you will see here as strengths, challenges, and characteristics. Before we finalize this, however, we wait for the results of the online survey. And one of the things that we saw here was great coherence. It was very reassuring and confirming that we saw that the online survey and the notes were not a perfect match, but very, very close. So then we're more secure that this really was good feedback. We've got representative information here. We put that into a narrative. You received a letter from us at the beginning of this report that puts all of this into a narrative. Tonight, I'm not going to go through that narrative. I am going to go through the outline, which are this PowerPoint presentation. So methodology is listening, taking notes, reviewing those notes, drawing some conclusions, confirming with the survey results, and then now presenting to you. The strengths I'll start with. So we're on the slide with strengths, correct? And they are listed in alpha order, not in order of importance. So I am going to read them quickly so that we can all stay together, and people, if they're outside listening, they're seeing these for the first time. I'll comment briefly, but then at the end of the strengths, I'll stop and ask for questions and discussion of strengths. Okay, strengths, again, in alpha order. AP offerings for high school students. You all want large, high-performing districts in the state and perhaps the country, and the number of AP offerings you have. Division-wide equity initiatives. Since 2018, you have a dedicated staff member, and you have clearly defined equity initiatives district-wide. Dr. Atkins' leadership and long tenure needs to be congratulated and celebrated. She is, participants commented on her integrity, strength, and character. Eliminating tracking is a strength for divisions to do, and you're taking it head on. Expanding academic enrichment and advancement opportunities. Again, another initiative is in place and needs to be nurtured. Fiscal support for schools. Something you're known for, and boy, do we see it in technology resources, salaries, class size, and other resources provided for schools and students. Highly regarded principals. Right now, I think you have a real treasure trove of leadership, and you're anticipating a new principal, and hopefully that person will be up to the same high standards as his, I think it is, colleagues. Improved graduation rates for African-American students. That was a goal set and a goal achieved and a goal you need to be proud of. The model STEM program is just that, a model. Pre-K programs, you guys were well above the curve from other districts around the state. A renowned fine arts program, absolutely another treasure for this district. Resources, expertise in the area of mental health, social and emotional learning, trauma-informed care, wellness, and health. Again, please, I know you're aware of this. This is extraordinary that you have these kind of wraparound services. We've been working before the pandemic, but certainly in the pandemic, and right now with so much concern about student mental health and post-pandemic issues. You are ready to support your students and your staff, and we congratulate you for that. Staff work ethic, you have some hardworking people in this division from top to bottom. There is no bottom. From across the board, you have some hardworking people. And teacher quality, heard stories about those exceptional teachers, the ones that have gone above and beyond, that are treasured and literally loved by members of the community and by students. And then technology to support student learning. Certainly you had your set of challenges in dealing with the pandemic, but right from the get-go, your students had the tools that they needed for learning virtually. And that is is a strength. So I'm going to stop there with strengths. Are there questions about strengths or comments? We'll go right on to challenges, concerns, and issues. And again, think that context, challenges, concerns, and issues. Expanding equity work to include English language learners and their families, as well as LGBTQ students. That was brought up repeatedly, that equity includes many underrepresented groups of students and underserved groups of students and families. Developing and executing a CIP that addresses the elementary school, middle school reconfiguration and addresses renovations of existing facilities. I think that stands for, I think that's pretty clear. And we'll get back to the reconfiguration in a minute. The growing English as a second language program, migrant and refugee families in the community. I'm not really sure. I was given an insight this week in one of my follow-up phone calls, how much this program is really growing. I sort of had the impression there's some growth there, but whether it's growing or not, we heard from, we did not actually meet many second language families, but we met a number of advocates who wanted to make it clear that they felt that more attention needed to be made in this area. Hiring and retaining staff, especially teachers and administrators of color. Implementing the reconfiguration plan, not just in terms of the building, but in terms of creating a dynamic middle school. Lack of sufficient progress in closing gaps in student literacy and academic achievement. Need for increased parent engagement for students of color. Lack of staff collaboration that includes principals and teachers in planning and decision-making. One of the things that we heard from practitioners pretty much across the board, not entirely, but pretty much across the board, was that the resources available at the school level and the expertise was not tapped into sufficiently, and that sometimes it felt very top-down in this district. And you had many qualified and talented teachers who felt that their voices were not heard and sometimes ignored. Maintaining the commitment to ending tracking of students. We congratulate you on taking on this task. It needs to be completed. Providing career pathways that include quality available career and technical ed programs. We did not do any kind of an assessment of your current program, but we heard from a number of people that this is an area that is going to need more attention. And we can tell you again, from working for many school districts, that this is an area that all school districts are looking at right now. Career pathways need to be broadened. Respect for all kinds of work. I heard anecdotal stories that students who were defined as capable who wished to take another pathway were discouraged. And again, we all want the best for every student and for every student to achieve his or her potential. For some students, that may not be, at least immediately, a four-year college. there are many quality career and tech ed programs out there that can give students industry certifications. And I know you already have some students that achieve in that area. But again, an area of challenge that I think you need to have on your radar screen at least. Resistance to change, innovation, and new perspectives. A strategic plan that needs revision to include measurable benchmarks and defined outcomes. Everybody wants things to improve. Not everybody agrees on what that looks like and how that's going to be measured. Transitioning from having an SRO in the building to a new security plan. You made that decision. You made it in concert with the city police department. That's a very positive thing, but there's still concern about this plan. And I think that could be an immediate problem if that's not addressed. And the use of stimulus funds. It's obviously something that school divisions are using now to get us past and go forward after the pandemic. But you have present needs, but the future implications might be if you're using too much of it or any of it for staffing, is that going to be sustainable? And you need to work with your finance people to make sure that you're thinking that through as you use these funds.
Let me just, there's three areas I want to emphasize of what Ann said. People would take great glee in telling me that you've been studying the elementary school, middle school reconfigurations to 2011. I mean, I'm just going to have enough people tell me the date it started, how long you've been looking at it. So there is that aura out there for your community that this has been a long time coming. The lack of staff collaboration that includes principals and teachers. Principals were very, very emphatic that they want to be more involved and more engaged in the process of decision-making and transparency and getting information and even meeting with the superintendent and or central staff. So there's a definite work and challenge for the new superintendent to make sure that the principals are engaged and their voices are being heard and they know that their voices are being heard, because sometimes voices are heard, but they don't always know it. And finally, I want to reemphasize, Ann, we are seeing this throughout the nation, locally, nationally. Creating FTEs with COVID money is always scary because at some point COVID money will go away and then you're still up with the FTEs. So if it's a program that was extremely worthwhile, then you've got to jiggle within the existing funds to react and sustain the FTEs that you put COVID money. FTEs work almost full-time equivalent positions. I'm an old HR guy, I'm sorry.
So discussion or questions about challenges. Ms. Prier.
Ms. Mundy, you indicated in your challenges, I don't know how many down, growing English as a second language program, migrant and refugee families in the community. And you indicated that there were several people that spoke on behalf of those communities. And in your strengths earlier, you indicated that the surveys and information were available in various languages. Did you find that they were not accessed or people were not asking to have the surveys translated? Or did these families feel more comfortable in talking to you or me or someone else and having the person that they trusted express their concerns?
You know, it's hard for me to answer because I really don't know. I don't know the source. I don't know what these families were experiencing. What their advocates told me was that the whole issue of how to communicate with non-English speaking parents is one that is still a struggle. You need more translators, you need more languages, but just translating things is not enough because you have to have some outreach. And I think you're making, I know, this is not to say that there aren't some steps that have been taken and continue to be taken. But what we heard several times was, this is a population whose needs we're not yet meeting. And also in terms of academics. that sometimes some of these students are put in classes with teachers who are not well trained to actually teach second language students or given the support that they need. So that whole area needs to be looked at. And you have accepted refugee families, and that is a wonderful thing about this community. And I know there's a lot of supports, community supports for them as well. But it's an area that needs attention.
Thank you.
So I had a question or a comment really. Was there anything of the challenges or concerns that surprised you about our district that said, you know, this is something that should be on top of the list of the next superintendent?
I'm going to say, you know, surprised is hard to, well, it's hard to surprise us, you know, look at us, we've seen everything. I think that you've had an interesting mix of, you've had strong leadership and consistent leadership, and you've accomplished things. There's much to be proud of here. I was surprised to hear the issues of trust and transparency and collaboration. And I think those are things that are critical for success. And I kind of we got the message, we got the message that maybe it's more in recent years that things have kind of broken down, but that's something that a new superintendent, if he or she wishes to be successful, is going to have to build trust and relationships the old-fashioned way. Visibility, talking to people, being available, and being open. Those are the things that are necessary.
And Mr. Wade, I would also add that I'm always interested when we're talking to all these people, which direction will they push these desired characteristics? So I'm kind of foreshadowing what Ann's just about to talk about. But because of your reputation as a great school district and having accomplished, for instance, the African-American graduation rate, just unprecedented in terms of what you did with that. I thought, well, maybe he's looking for a status quo person to just keep this district humming. My surprise was a lot of people, and some use this phrase, which I heard more than once, which is we need a fresh set of eyes. So people, and there's the thing in here about change is hard. I think people want somebody, they're desiring somebody who can come in and say, this is good, this is good, this is good, but we need to change this, this, and this. They really are looking for a fresh set of eyes and somebody who can not only say, this is what we need, but somebody who can execute it and get the change to take. Because you can say you need it, but to actually get to change, that's the hard part.
Before I begin characteristics on this whole issue of change, I would say overall, we heard that people were expecting a change agent. That's not surprising. If you've had somebody with a long tenure, of course, you're going to look for change. That's just natural. When we've dealt with school districts where there's been a churn of superintendents, which is much more often, well, that is now becoming the norm, unfortunately. When we deal with a churn of superintendents, what do people want? Stability. They want a stabilizer. They've had some different leadership perspective every 3 years. So to say that somebody wants change does not mean that the past was bad. It means people are very open and expecting somebody to come in and address things differently and to have a new perspective. And that's what we heard.
Excuse me, could I just chime in on this one? Because I think this relates to a question I had about the one that was resistance to change, innovation, new perspectives. And I was actually surprised to see that one. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little more on, flesh that one out a little bit more.
I'm sure can add to this, but I'll give you some specific examples because they're kind of a juxtaposition with each other. I had several people say we chase a lot of shiny new objects. Whatever the latest shiny object is, that's the one we're going to fund and chase right now. What we really would like to do is make sure that any change we make is sustained, has professional development behind it, has measurements that last, and then we prove the success of that program. So what I'm saying is they'd rather have fewer initiatives that are well thought out, well measured, well metriced, and stick with those rather than chase these shiny new objects. I think in some ways, maybe we should have said too much change, but at the same point, we felt we need to put that in there. But that perspective of we'd rather do a few things really well that are really well proven and that we can measure and show success with, it's better than chasing a lot of new things.
And in addition, when I get into the next section on desired characteristics, I'll talk about instructional leadership. This one I heard from a number of teachers and again, more practitioners and parents. You have a wonderful, very traditional and very successful for some students academic program. There is some concern, however, that there's still too much emphasis on test results and on measuring learning in a very, very narrow way. And so there's a hunger for some looking at, and again, these are issues around the educational world right now. How can we get out of this? How can we start looking at student learning in ways that measure problem solving, that in ways that are more relevant for students, and that actually in many ways provide more rigor for students? So that's the kinds of discussion that people would like to hear. You'll see in the notes sometimes some people, and kind of some sad comments about reducing kids to test scores and looking at kids as test scores. And this, again, among students in some of the, what would be described, I guess, as lowest performing schools. They're not test scores. They're human beings that have the potential to think and solve problems and be creative. And they want to tap into that and to get into some of this practice.
Do you find that in most districts, though? I mean, I'm seriously questioning, because like I feel like that's not a novel thing. Like the dialogue is around how do we balance the testing versus, other things like letting children.
Yeah,
be.
I absolutely. This is the dilemma that people are in right now. There's some hope that post-pandemic, because we kind of got away from that discussion, and now can we talk again about what does achievement look like for all children, and how can we make certain that we are providing this kind of rigorous and relevant curriculum to all kids that is not solely measured by SOL results. That is not a unique conversation in this district because of what we just talked about concern about whether people are talking across the levels to each other and whether there's honest conversations about practice, right? And whether new ideas are welcomed, not always acted on, but at least listened to. I think in that context, this would also fall. Are we ready to look at desired characteristics? I want to add one other thing. You'll see in your many-page report that there's an addendum. Brad met with the board of the NAACP, and they asked to provide a written document that is part of the report. So that document is here. And they also included recommended characteristics. So those were also part of our consideration. And I think you will see that in what we recommend here as well. So desired characteristics, I'm going to go through these and then we'll discuss. Budget and finance experience, critical, you know that. A communicator who can build relationships and trust in a diverse community, talks to everybody, can relate to people across the board. Creates and retains a collaborative work environment where divergent perspectives are valued without fear of reprisal. Deeply committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, relentless in seeking improvement in this area. I don't think anybody sitting in this room disagrees with that one. An instructional leader who can guide the system in development of more rigorous and relevant, instruction for all students. Knowledge of the unique aspects and needs of middle schools. One of the things that we hope, and I know you hope as well, and we will certainly in our screening, although we will not say if you're not a middle school person, you would not be recommended, but we are going to talk about with them about the reconfiguration. The reconfiguration, as you guys know, is more than about a building. There has to be a philosophy around middle school education and middle school learners that goes with it. And that's an opportunity for somebody to really lead in that area and create a model middle school for this division. Political skills to navigate successfully in a diverse activist community. You told us this was an activist community. You are right. We believe you. We believe you. Yes. Strong and confident enough to deal with conflict and make tough decisions. This is not a job for someone who cannot who cannot understand that they are going to be criticized. Transparent and open. Understands the need for career pathways that include quality career and technical education. Visible in schools and the community.
I just have to stop there. There isn't a person who didn't tell me that. And it even extended into the central office. There's a huge hunger that the superintendent and the central office staff, some people put it very bluntly, they need to live in the community. But others said we just need to see them more, especially the superintendent. So this, if I had to say one overarching thing, this is probably the one I heard the most.
And then finally, visionary, optimistic about the future of public schools. I didn't put the word inspirational there. I think I used it someplace else, but you know, we are all hungry for inspiration, and we will hopefully bring you people that can do the job, and not maybe in a flashy way, but through their dedication to the work of this division, their integrity, honesty, and effort can be inspirational and can inspire others. I asked one of the highest leaders in your political organization, not in the schools, I will not say who I spoke to, but I asked if they really believed that things could change. And that's a hard question, and it was hard for this person to answer. And I think, you know, all of us in education right now have to really say, do we really believe that things can change? And I would hope that you would select, well, we will ask people that question. Do you believe that things can change? Will you be an optimistic, forward-thinking leader in public schools in a time when public schools have been derided pretty much, and a lot of people have lost confidence in them? So that's what we hope for.
So I just want to tag on to that, and I agree. I think that is an excellent question. And so as you all are looking for candidates and determining which one, would you all be looking for someone that has proven, you know, that they are willing to make that change and believe in that change, or one that has a really strong vision and can show how they can do it, or maybe they've done it but not at that level before?
We absolutely want demonstrable evidence. In other words, don't just tell me you believe this. Don't tell me you have a vision for this. Show me what you've done. You know, and we want, I'd like to see some metrics, even supply me with the metrics to prove that you actually engage that change, or we're part of a team that engaged that change. Because everybody talks a good game, especially in an interview process, but seeing the evidence that they actually move the scores, you know, that's a whole nother thing.
So Madam Chair, I just have one quick follow-up to that. So, I mean, these characteristics are really something that can't be measured, you know, so how are you going to, I mean, the political skills, it's very unique here in Charlottesville. And so how are you going to like measure someone political? I mean, all of these really, how are you going to
For sitting superintendents, it's to see how complex is their community, what is their political environment, and how well have they maneuvered that. Some of that comes back to social media, unfortunately, right now. You can kind of tell how a sitting superintendent's doing based by the volume of social media. For assistant superintendents, deputies, and associates, it's a little harder. In an interview process, excuse me, we'll ask them, tell us about a tough time that you had, either in a political decision or something you had to advocate for a child and push forward. And then we'll verify that through a reference check or something to see if that really did happen the way they told us. So we really do go after, again, demonstrable evidence wherever we can. Everybody talks about walking the walk and being visible in schools. We actually ask people in their setting, are they a person who gets out of the office or are they in the schools? I mean, we really will probe most of these for demonstrable evidence. And you're right. Are there hard metrics we can tick off? No, but we've got to do the best we can to make a match.
This sounds like a unicorn. So I'm very concerned about kind of people who can talk a big game. And I think so many politicians and leaders are really, and I'm fine with leaders who can delegate and who have strong skills in collaboration, but like kind of the vacuous leader, valueless leader. I mean, this is something that I'm very concerned about. This community might attract at this point. And so I want to make sure that those folks do not apply.
As do we. And clearly, yes, this is a uniform. Yes, this is, oh my gosh. You know, this is the ideal. But we also use this document and this information with the candidates. We will tell them, we don't just want you to get the job, we want you to be able to do the job. If you get there, you're going to need to have very strong political skills to navigate successfully in a diverse activist community. How would you deal with some of these kinds of issues? So no person is going to have all of these skills at the same levels. We all have strengths and weaknesses. All of us do. But this is what we called out of what we were told, both in the interviews and on the surveys. These are the characteristics that are most needed for success. And we will look to find somebody who most matches this. And one other thing in terms of the kind of person, yes, of course, we want not just talk, we want people who have demonstrable success. But Brad mentioned, well, we already have a number of sitting superintendents who have either applied or expressed interest. And that gives you it's easier to measure success with sitting superintendents. But we also are open to those people who have great promise. They still have to have some measures of success, but great promise, because sometimes those people actually can deliver more for different reasons. So it's not a one size fits all. We will bring you a diverse pool of candidates, and then you will get to know these people.
I just think humility is also really important. I think one of the things that the transparency requires honesty. And so that's where I think that's what I think many of the characteristics kind of point to, is kind of humility about working together and being honest about their so anybody, I just really appreciate anybody who can have hard conversations about where their weaknesses are.
I love your word vacuous. It's better than unicorn, actually. And so I think Ann and I will be screening hard for no vacuous. But the nice thing about this is, and Mr. Wade, this enters into your question too, we want you to spend a lot of time with the candidates you finally will decide. So we will have done our check, but you should ask them every tough question you can. You should ask them to demonstrate. You should ask them to bring you materials. You can give them situational problems. I mean, we will help you with that to make sure that at the end of the day, we are all sure that you're making a good choice. And the reference checking that you guys will do personally on these people, that's going to help you with some confidence too. So there's a process ahead. We think we can make that work. Any other questions at this point?
Brad,
Yeah.
I'm concerned about platitudes. It's an interview. People will say and do what they need to do
Yep.
and say. And often you cannot always see through that. And we do a lot of talking around the table about transparency and being your authentic self and all of the buzzwords. I'm tired of the buzzwords, but how do you, I know there's a matrix that you will use out of your larger corporate office, because there'll be some people that will automatically be eliminated because of various reasons.
Well, you're right. I mean, the ones that like, Ann and I were discussing some of the names we were talking about on the way down, and we had one of the perennial appliers, person's applied for every position we've ever seen in our life, you know, so yeah, thank you. And, but the rest is something that we really engage in, to your point. I mean, I have a couple strengths in life, and they also my horrible weaknesses. I value honesty and lack of tact. And lack of tact has gotten me in a lot of problems, but if, you know, I've had people come to interviews and I'll say, and it's the old police department approach where if they ask you the question, they already know the answer. So sometimes I'll ask a candidate, can you tell me about this situation? Because I've already done a lot of research and I want to see how they answer the question I already know the answer to. And, you know, about 90% of the time, I get very close to my version of what my question is, what I think the answer is. But there's 10% of the time people just start lying to me. And I shut down I don't tell them that you're lying to me, but we're not moving on, you know, we're just not going to move on. So we do have a methodology to get at, because, and that's why we even like to sit with you during that first round of interviews, because we've done the screening interview and we want to be sure that we're seeing consistency in answers, that things didn't change, that we're not hearing some other version, or, you know, because you're right, the performance in an interview, that is one skill. That's a nice skill to have, and it gets you through the interview process. That's not the skill you need to be a superintendent. The skill you need to be a superintendent is different than your interview skill. So we really want to cut through. You had a
All of
good
that.
interview.
Okay, because you know, the words of the day are diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Oh,
And
magnified, yeah.
just because you have a diverse pool does not mean that people are included. And so there are certain things when I hear those words as an administrator that I look for personally. And when they are thrown out, because they will be thrown out in the conversation.
We will hear it a lot.
There will be certain things that I am looking for. And I have to say to you as an African-American female administrator, I understand those three words. But they often have different meanings for me because of who I am and what I do. And so when those things come up, I look at them through a different lens. It is not to say that you and Ann do not, but there are just certain things that are inherent for me that I am extremely concerned about in this process.
And that's why when you get to see the applicants for an extended period of time, you need to develop that thread of what does equity mean to that person in your lens, in your coloration of that. Absolutely. That's why it's so important. Okay. All right, I'm going to move on to the executive, the online survey executive summary. And these are highlights. This is like another 15-page report that we also will post online tomorrow, and you already have it. But this is from all the respondents of the online survey. This is something we use nationally, and so we can even tell how you're doing compared to other districts and stuff like that. But more importantly, it's how this is consistent with what we heard verbally. They have these broad themes called teaching and learning, management, vision and values, and community engagement. So you'll see like a TL or an M or a VV or a CE. That's what that stands for. Those are 4 broad areas. So sometimes surveys will show everybody is concerned about teaching and learning. Sometimes they're all concerned about vision and values. You actually have a nice mix in all of your areas here, and I'll talk about that. So on page 9 of the PowerPoint, we have what are the strengths perceived by the people who responded to this survey. And look at the first one, it's fascinating, and pandemic will really test this one. Technology is integrated into the classroom, teaching and learning. That's your strongest one. But look at the second one. That's a nice one to have too. I can't complain about either one of those. District schools are safe. And the third one is about management. Some people never see this one in their strengths. The division employs effective teachers, administrators, and support staff in its schools. That speaks again to the quality of this district. Vision and values on the fourth one there. The district's working to close achievement and opportunity gaps. And finally, a fifth strength one in community engagement. The district engages with diverse racial, cultural, and socioeconomic groups. Those are great top 5 to have as seen as strengths. And again, I think you'd be very proud of that. Now let's see what characteristics your online people want. Well, coming back to that trust and transparency, there it is at the top, community engagement, but also I think it goes beyond that to your teachers, students, and everybody. A positive professional climate of mutual trust and respect amongst faculty, staff, and administrators. Again, we put that into the concerns and challenges. We put into desired characteristics. Here it is again showing up in your online respondents. Second, teaching and learning, understand and be sensitive to the needs of a diverse student population. So even though you have progressed so far and made so much progress with that, it's still a concern or desired characteristic. The culture of high expectations for all students and personnel, vision and values. Here comes back retaining, recruiting, employing, developing your staff. And of course, a nice one also is a clear, compelling vision for the future. I find this next page very interesting. It's too small in the PowerPoint. You can't read it. You almost have to go to a page like this. This asks the top 4 and it's grouped by what did the administrators think were their top 4? What did the community members think were their top 4? What did the parents, the students, the support staff, and the teachers? Boy, do you have agreement on the first 2. You have 60% of the people in all these groups said foster that positive professional climate. 60% of the people said they want that transparent respect, collaboration. That's what they want. And second one, 48%, again, all these groups said this was in their top 2. The sensitive to the needs of the student population. Now, when we get into the next couple categories, we start to split off. Administrators and parents want high expectations for all students. Then we get to the parents want great staff, recruiting, employing, and retaining effective personnel. And teachers want that too. Interesting, administrators, community members, and students want a clear and compelling vision for the future. I found students ranking that third as really, really interesting. I don't see that very often. And then transparent, deep understanding of educational research and emerging best practices. That was community and students. And finally, support staff and teachers came in with transparent communication and be visible and throughout the district and actively engaged in life. I'm surprised visible is that low on this one. I think it's because the other choices were more important to them because again, nobody stopped to ever not say to me, be visible throughout the district. But wide congruence on the first 2 and a little bit of split. Look at the ones that don't make it. Sometimes that's interesting, like down at the bottom, guidance for district-wide curriculum instruction. You're doing a great job, obviously. Day-to-day operations, again, not important or in the top 4 for
Well, it's
anybody.
because she was so strong at that in the past. So we just, that's like an assumed, it's
Yeah.
like the foundation. We already
Yeah.
have that.
But in some districts, we'll see those are the top 2, you know, so it's fascinating how it arranges itself in this thing. Take a look at that. I think that's very interesting. I also encourage you, the public too, the public who's listening, read all 34 pages. I mean, we've given you a real synopsis of the comments and done some broad categorizations. But when you see the actual comments made by a lot of people, whether they be teachers, administrators, community members, et cetera, they're powerful messages. So please do take the time to read that. The last 2 pages are really a reiteration of the ones that Ann just went through for desired characteristics. There's absolutely nothing different on page 12. On page 13, certified as a Virginia superintendent, obviously extremely important, increasing track record, demonstratable track record of responsibilities and success, experience for success improving, and we want that to be demonstratable outcomes for students of color, experience as a superintendent or cabinet level leader in a diverse community, and doctorate preferred. So that's the essence of this report. We put it together. I think Ann did a great job. I think we all did a great job in getting this together for you very fast because we wanted to get this out on your website because one of our most interesting screening questions, Ms. Puryear, is what do you know about Charlottesville? And if they don't reference that, I've seen the leadership profile report, I will admit that we sometimes prompt them and say, have you seen the leadership profile report? And if the answer is no, they're moving down in our list of, you're not doing too well in this interview. Because we want them to read this and actually see how their leadership could fit into this type of setting. So questions for either Ann or I, or comments?
I just have a comment that, you know, you talked to a lot of people in the community. It's a small community, and I just heard great things about your interviewing techniques, and it was very well received. So thank you for this thorough information.
And I will take this opportunity to say, we really like you.
Yeah.
You have very different, we heard very different things, and some things were not easy to hear. But you're good people. You're good people. And every person treated us respectfully. And even if they were saying some hard things, there was a respectful attitude.
But there is a, but there's a, no.
However,
I want to reemphasize, remember what I'm saying is number one is transparent and collaboration. I think we had more requests in this division than in many we've been in for private conversations because they did not want to say comments in front of other people. So that's a very, you know, you asked me about surprise. That's a little bit of a surprise. I will also say, I want to go back to her liking everybody. I had a meeting with the most ecstatic community member who had just won a primary. And that person was just so happy that morning that he almost could not think about anything.
Yeah.
it was an
He's
early
still kind
meeting.
of riding that high.
Yeah. We are very grateful.
Yes,
I do. I want to extend my gratitude to you both. And I know there was a couple of situations where there were requests to speak with you, and you both were just so gracious and available. So I thank you for that. And taking it a step further, there was, you know, questions about whether certain people, you know, received invites or were not included in different groups. And you both were very willing to reach out and receive, you know, input from them even after we had closed, you know, the dates down. So thank you for that.
Also, Brad and Ann, thank you all for giving us this abbreviated version of the report tonight, not only to the board, but to the public. I am not running for superintendent, but I did read the 35-page report.
Yeah.
Any other questions, concerns from anybody? All
I'm
right.
concerned it's only 6:20 and we might be done.
Oh, you know,
I'm just kidding.
You just jinxed it.
Easy now.
That is a strength. That is a, we could do that.
Thank you, Dr. Kraft. Good point.
So just, this really wasn't written here, but at this point, just so we can maybe do this publicly, is an opportunity for you all to just continue to receive applications. So we really don't, unless we have questions for you or you have questions for us, you know, you know how to contact us, but we won't really meet again until you come back and provide us with your tiered list of applicants.
And I hope to give the board a very generic update, probably about every 2.5 weeks, just in terms of where we are in terms of the pool and stuff like that. It's not going to be very specific, but I don't want you to feel like there's a huge void. I'll tell you the actions we're taking and people we're tracking down and stuff like that. So I will give you an update. Well, I think we had 36 or something like that, and we probably have another 20 names we're pursuing. So
Wow.
we feel very good.
So the next time we meet and talk about this publicly is August 3rd.
It will not be a public meeting because that
Oh, I'm sorry,
night,
August 4th.
that night we're developing the questions
Oh,
for your
that's our
first
closed
interview.
session.
And you're seeing the entire slate of candidates with our recommendations. You'll decide who you want to bring back for interviews. And then I know Ms. Torres and I have talked, you have the task of putting together a community committee, confidential, and that will happen on August 13th is the current plan. And I asked that if you could name that committee by, let's say, mid-July or end of July, Ms. Monday and I could have a Zoom meeting with them to prep them for how that will go and get them ready for the confidentiality issue with that.
So the meeting, that confidential meeting, we don't have a date for that yet, or for the
The community
community.
committee is August 13th.
Okay, so yeah, what I would like to do is ask
board members, if you have 2 or 3 people.
But could you, before you do that, could you have Brad?
Speak up.
Before you do that, Madam Chair, could you please have Brad explain to the listeners, and it will be recorded exactly,
So-
verbatim, punctuatum, what you mean by confidential committee member.
The board will be seeing a first round of candidates, and if those are satisfactory, they plan to send some candidates, and we don't know the number until that day of decision is here, to a community panel. Because we will have a lot of sitting superintendents who will want to try for this position because it's a challenge to them, but will not want to reveal to their existing community that they're trying for Charlottesville until they see how far they get. This committee will have to create a aura of confidence and confidentiality around it, and we will actually have you sign statements that'll be very specific. For instance, you cannot reveal other members of the committee. You cannot reveal who you met with. And this is not just during August 13th. This is in perpetuity, because let's pretend there's A candidate, B candidate, and C candidate. A candidate gets it. We do not want a community member panel 3 weeks after you have your new superintendent name talking about the B and C candidates, because that absolutely violates all the confidentiality of protecting who else applied for the position. So they will be signing a statement. And we've had very good luck with this because we do really emphasize you will hurt the students of Charlottesville if you scare away some of these great applicants because you can't keep confidentiality. This applies to the board. It applies to this community committee. And Ann and I will be emphasizing this over and over. But yes, if you're volunteering for this community, you need 2 criteria. One, you can be present, probably. It's probably going to be a physically present on August 13th for most of the day. It will take us an entire day to do this process. And 2, you have no problems with confidentiality, and that includes social media. I just had a member who I had to caution and send them their signed statement of confidentiality because they said they can't wait to see who the actual superintendent is because they served on the committee. Now, they didn't name another member. They didn't name who they had interviewed, but they certainly violated the thing they had just signed. And I had to say, you just went over the line and put on social media that you were a member of the search committee. So don't do that again. So, Ms. Furrier, did I meet your expectation?
You met my expectations. Now, the question is, as a former administrator, if everyone was listening to your direction.
So it's all about repetition, right?
Yes.
Any other questions before I proceed? So regarding this confidential community committee that we're going to put together, I would like to ask each board member, if you're interested, to submit 2 or 3 names. We'll figure out how we're going to do this. We are looking at, your recommendation was about 14. So I would hope that we can reach out to a variety of people in different settings throughout the community that. Okay, so staff, I mean, is there any group that we should steer away from? Yeah, school board member on that. Yeah, on that, we'll
No.
have our shot at
Yeah,
it.
you'll have your own time. No, this should be as ecumenical as you can make it. One group should not predominate. I mean, a community member should not show up and see 13 staff members, nor should a staff member be the only one with 13 community members. You know, try and even it out. Make sure, think of all the people who would say they want to have a voice in this, and then figure out the best representative who would bring that part to the table. The danger in you each nominate. No, this is a huge issue. This is actually huge. The issue is, if Mr. Wade brings 2 people, Ms. McKeever, Ms. Purrier, you know, and you all are picking people who represent the same groups, you need to go back to the drawing board because you need a broader swath of it. So yeah, you're going to need some, this is actually a little bit of a struggle. It's a hard, challenging board assignment. Good luck.
Thank you. I'll take that on. And I'll reach out to you all individually and we can kind of talk about interests and groups that we might be reaching out to.
No, it'll be a large group, structured interview. All 14 will be sitting in the room, and they'll spend about an hour and a half with each candidate, asking probably about 13 questions of them. And then as each candidate leaves, I go around the room and say, Mr. Wade, what was the strength? Ms. McKeever, what was the strength? And I sat, and then I'm going to go back. Mr. Wade, what was the concern? Ms. McKeever, what was the concern? And we're going to provide the board with those issues so that as you go into your final interview, let's pretend you like candidate A. You're going to look at the issues and make sure all your subsequent questions and conversations are going to be clearing up issues that the community has brought forward. Okay.
This will have to be repeated again and again. You select the superintendent. That is the work of the school board and the sole responsibility of the school board. We do not, and this committee will not. This committee will advise you, and it'll advise you in a very structured and clear way that is the same for each candidate. But we will not have a consensus from that group. They will not vote. That's not appropriate. They are there to advise you so that you can make this decision. You're going to have information that they don't have. First of all, you've seen all of their background. They'll also see their resumes and that kind of thing. You're also going to be calling references, and then you're going to spend a day with each candidate. You're going to have different experiences and more information. So I will say again, they do not pick, no one picks the superintendent except for the 7 people on the school board. Thank you.
Any other questions? We appreciate you both. Thank you. Be safe. Safe travels. Yes. Okay, we are moving on to board response to written reports. Any questions, concerns about this?
Good job.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for the report.
Yes.
And we will have an update, I believe in August, more comprehensive update on that. And we are now moving to our second opportunity for comments from members of the community. Again, anybody here in the audience is welcome to step up and make comment if you would like, and or if there's anybody registered on the Zoom meeting or the Zoom platform, please state your name, and you're limited to 3 minutes. And I don't know if it does not appear that we have anybody in the Zoom room. We'll give it just a couple more seconds. All right. We are going to close comments from members of the community. Was there a question? I can't hear you.
Are we gonna do the Kim Howell new safety model update? Oh, I didn't know. Okay.
If you have any questions about it, that we just finished that. So if you have any questions or concerns like that, do you have any thoughts about it?
No, I was just wondering if we usually do something with a presentation or something. Thank you.
So at this point in time, I had felt comfortable with her providing us just a quick written report and update, and have asked that they come back in August with a more comprehensive presentation to the board. All right, thank you. And we are moving on to comments from the board, and I will start with Dr. Kraft, so I do not forget you. Appreciate you zooming in.
Yeah, well, I am just struck with, the solemn task before us in really finding the right person to lead our division. And I really appreciate the work that's gone into this. And we have a lot more work ahead, but it's really probably the most important thing that our board is tasked to do. And yeah, so I'm very aware of that at the moment and look forward to getting that process underway in terms of candidates and the community committee, I think is really important. The confidentiality, I also agree is super, super important for that. So that's really all I have right now. I think that we're working on so many things at this point in time that are really big and really important for our division, both now and in the future. And I think it's just a uniquely important time for us all. So I'm looking forward to having a little bit of a break, and I imagine other people are too, and then just diving right back into it.
Thank you. Tonight I will start, I believe, from my left. So Lashandra, do you have any comments?
I do not have any comments.
All right, thank you. Mr. Bryant?
Very brief, as I said earlier, this document has set the tone as we move forward in seeking a new superintendent. I spent all day yesterday reading this, and it was very interesting, the comments from various members of our community. And they will get a chance tomorrow to see it as based on the website. So I would encourage everybody to read this document in detail.
Thank you. Ms. Leah Puryear? Ms. Lisa Torres? I too read the document. Probably took me a little longer than most people because I was dividing my time and making sure that I gave it the attention that it needed. Before I got on the school board, I had friends in other localities that are and or were school board members, and they shared with me exactly what Ms. Mundy said. Your job is to hire a superintendent, if ever that happens, address budget and policy issues. But they said the most important thing was the hiring of a superintendent if you're ever put in that position. So we are put in that position. I think that we are poised to select someone that will be able to take our school division to the next level. I think an advantage that we have is none of us have ever done this before. And I think we're going to do more than our due diligence to make sure that we get it right. And that's it. Thank you. Ms. McKeever.
I have no comments.
Whew. Shocker. Mr. Wade. No comments. Oh my goodness. Is there a baseball game going on or something?
Swim meet.
Or swim meet. Thank you, everybody, for all that you do. I was actually sitting here listening, appreciating all of your comments, and reflecting back to when Dr. Atkins approached us and shared that she was moving on, and just that first few days of what that felt like. And as Ms. Puryear said, that realization that none of us had done this and gone through this process. And so as we, I don't know what you all were doing, but as I was scrambling within, my head and within, and amongst other people to kind of get a grasp of what this was going to feel like, it was very overwhelming there for a few days, and we kind of eased into it, and I think got into a flow, and I really was a little surprised that I felt a sense of peace tonight, listening to them and knowing the work, as they laid out what they would do and how they would engage with the community, and bringing to us, all of the comments. in the form that they did and making it available. I mean, it's just like things are falling into place. And yes, there is still some tough work ahead of us. But I feel like we're in good hands and we are moving forward. So that was a nice feeling to have sitting here tonight. Also, wanted to acknowledge and thank, parents again who send emails and ask questions. I think there were some good questions in an email that came in this week just regarding, a change in our practices as they look to enroll their young student into our schools and wanting to have a better understanding of what's that going to look like? What will the classroom look like? What will masking policies look like? What will, distancing, interaction, instruction, all of that. And were really great questions. And so, I just wanted to remind everybody that we as a board are following a policy that was in response to the state of emergency that was enacted by the governor last year. And as everybody knows, I mean, and there was a policy that we enacted and put in place that spells out very clearly masking expectations and how we kind of survived and got through this year. So thank you to everybody who was part of that, to the COVID committee who worked really hard to kind of help form that in our practices. And then we've adapted that as guidance has changed, but we were really working under again, guidance or, because that state of emergency was there, and then guidance from VDOE and the CDC. Well, that state of emergency is set to expire at the end of this month. And after that happens, we need to wait and see a little bit about any legislation that might affect masks, and also wait to hear and see if there's guidance that comes down from the governor and the State Board of Education, VDOE, and CDC. And we as a board and Mr. Henderson and staff and everybody will receive all of that information and come together and have discussions and make policies based on where we are as we get closer to the return to school. So I know that's not maybe concrete answers, but there's still some question marks out there. So I do want to just remind everybody to be safe and be healthy and be well. And I do want to put in a plug, if I may, for Blue Ridge Health District. I am a healthcare provider, and I just found out this week, and I deal with people who are homebound, which means it's really taxing for them to get out. And although some can get out for medical appointments, there are some who just, it is near impossible for them to leave their home. And so I reached out to the health district and made a phone call. And they are able, and they are actually working with the fire department and local EMS who will go to people's homes and provide vaccines. And I did not know that. So and we did. I sat right there. I opened up my phone. We called. She got a phone call that evening and has their first vaccine. And I just felt like that was great to know, and it's great to share out for those, if anybody has anybody that still needs, and can't get to one of the locations to receive a vaccine. So with that being said, I will wrap up my comments and hand it over to Mr. Henderson and ask if you have any comments.
Just an update. Several days ago, we received information from VDOE in terms of our buildings and what can be eliminated regarding procedures that have been put in place previously, and that is mask wearing. Our buildings that are not serving students, employees do not need to wear a mask, nor do they need to follow the space restrictions. If an employee is not vaccinated, he or she must wear a mask at all times. And if our employees are in buildings that are serving children, they must wear masks and follow the space restrictions. So right now we'll have a few elementary schools that are not serving summer school, and we'll have only a few employees in those buildings because there's a lot of construction going on. Those employees will not need to follow mask and distance specifications, as well as the building the division office as well as the annex, unless they're, we're beginning to receive preschool children, and then they will have to wear masks. So that just changed 4 or 5 days coming from the VDOE and recommendation from the CDC. We're still waiting. Once we hear from the governor after June 30th, I'm sure there will be additional information coming to us as we prepare for the opening of school. Other than that, I have no other comments.
Thank you. And now we're on to a work session wrap up. If Dr. Baptist is still with us.
Yes, ma'am. We only had one item, and that was to make sure that in the application for the return to learn that there was a question that if anyone needed additional help with their virtual learning to let us know. That was the one item.
If we can target that to our K through 2 families, that would be great.
Okay.
Please.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right. And we are on to upcoming meetings, which I think pushes out to August. And we need to August 5th. 5 p.m. and we will be back in the media center. So we will be back to our normally scheduled time and location. So with that being said, I am going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody.
No.